The officer's gloves scraped the bark as he tied the last knot, rope digging harshly into her wrists. His laughter was sharp, echoing across the square like it belonged there. She stood still, chest rising, refusing to drop her gaze. "Too quiet," one muttered, as though her silence was an insult. A woman from the crowd let out a short breath, then bit her lip, stepping back into the shade. No one moved forward. The square filled with the sound of cicadas, louder than the murmurs. "Don't look at me," the protagonist whispered, her voice barely above a breath, but the officer heard. His grin faltered for a moment. Narration. Every chuckle in that square was not just theirs. It was borrowed, stolen from those who refused to speak. Silence was its own hand on the rope. A man with folded arms muttered to himself, "This ain't right," but when eyes turned, he shook his head, swallowing the words. The rope stretched tighter. The oak stood still, ancient, as if it had witnessed this before, her skin pressed against its roughness. But she would not give them her fear. "You know who she is?" another officer asked, almost mocking. "Just another loudmouth trying to be someone." The laughter rose again, though thinner this time, like the sound had cracked. Narration. What no one admitted aloud. Every laugh cost them something. Pride. Humanity. The children watching from behind their mother's skirts would remember the rope, not the law. She tilted her head, meeting the crowd with steady eyes. "You'll forget this moment," she said softly, "but your children won't." A silence fell heavier than the rope itself. A boy in the back laughed too loudly, trying to copy the officers. His mother tugged his sleeve sharply, whispering, "Not here." But her voice shook. The officers' laughter rolled heavier, filling the cracks of silence. One leaned close, sneering, "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" Her lips didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed, steady on his face. The grin wavered only for a second before he turned away, forcing another laugh. Narration. They wanted noise. They wanted begging, cracks, something to hold as proof of power. But silence, steady and unbroken, was heavier than any rope. A man near the front muttered, "She ain't scared." His friend elbowed him hard, hushing the thought. No one wanted to carry it out loud. "Look at her," another officer scoffed, voice louder now. "She thinks she's better than us." Finally she spoke, her voice soft, nearly swallowed by the square. "No, I think you know I am." The laughter stumbled. One officer coughed, the sound cutting awkwardly through their mockery. The crowd shifted, unease passing like a shadow across faces. Narration. Her gaze carried weight no rope could tighten, no laughter could drown. For the first time, it wasn't her shame filling the air. It was theirs. The boy who had laughed earlier stared at her, confused, tugging again at his mother's sleeve. She pulled him closer, eyes cast down, unable to meet the woman's. The rope held her body, but her silence held the square. And in that silence, the officer's power didn't feel so certain anymore. She blinked once, calm, unbroken. The laughter no longer echoed. It cracked, faltered, and fell into something dangerously close to quiet. The words landed heavier than the officer expected. His smirk twitched, but he held it in place, forcing another laugh. The others tried to join, but the sound came uneven, strained, almost hollow. The crowd shifted again, some turning their eyes away, pretending to watch the ground. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Careful with that tongue." Her reply was almost a whisper, but it carried, "Careful with what you believe is yours." Narration. The rope dug into her skin, but it was his face that showed the strain. He wanted her broken. Instead, every word chipped away at his certainty. Another officer cleared his throat, loud, trying to cover the silence that followed. "Don't give her the satisfaction," he muttered. Yet the mutter sounded like advice to himself more than anyone else. A teenage boy near the back whispered, "She's not scared." His friend nudged him, shaking his head, but the whisper had already spread. People heard it. They just pretended they didn't. The first officer straightened, trying to recover. "You think silence and smart words make you strong?" Her eyes lifted, steady, calm. "No, they make you see what strength really is." The laughter didn't return this time. Instead, a cough, a shuffle, an awkward clearing of throats filled the air. The stage had shifted, even if no one wanted to admit it. Narration. The attempt to humiliate had cracked, not her. The rope still held her body, but the crowd felt the weight of her voice. It was no longer just her silence standing against them. It was the town beginning to hear itself. The officer stepped back, silent now, his smirk gone. Her words remained. A child's question broke through first, faint but sharp. "Mama, why won't they stop?" The mother hushed him quickly, pressing his face against her skirt. Her eyes darted, guilty, as if silence could erase the sound. The officer closest to her smirked wider, feeding off the quiet compliance. "See? Not a soul cares enough to move." His voice carried, cruel and deliberate. She shifted against the rope, skin burning where it scraped, but her eyes stayed steady. "Silence," she whispered, "isn't loyalty. It's fear." Narration. Her words traveled, though softly spoken. The crowd stiffened. Some swallowed hard, others shifted uncomfortably. The truth had found ears, even if mouths stayed closed. A man in the back, arms crossed, muttered, "Don't draw attention. Just let it pass." His friend gave a slow nod, but neither looked proud of their choice. Another officer spat near her feet. "You talk too much for someone bound." She didn't flinch. "And yet you're the one afraid of words." His jaw clenched. He tried to laugh it off, but the laugh cracked, brittle. The rope cut deeper into her wrists, but it was his pride unraveling in front of them all. Narration. The silence pressed heavier than chains. Every parent who looked away, every neighbor who pretended not to see, they all shared the rope's weight. And they knew it. The child's voice came again, softer now, almost hidden. "Mama, is she bad?" The mother swallowed, unable to answer. The question lingered in the heat, unanswered, heavier than any verdict. The officer glanced around, finally noticing the stares no longer carried laughter. It was the same silence, but now it felt different. Judging. Waiting. Her breath steadied. "The rope isn't mine to carry. It's yours." And no one dared laugh. A faint click broke through the heavy silence. A teenager, half hidden near the edge of the square, gripped his phone tight. His hands shook, but he didn't lower it. The red light blinked, capturing every cruel smirk, every rope knot, every face that chose not to look away. One officer noticed, his jaw tightening. "Put that down, kid." His voice carried authority, but it wavered just enough to expose fear. The boy froze, then whispered back, "No." Narration. That single word cracked something. It wasn't loud, it wasn't defiant, but it was steady, stronger than the laughter that had filled the air minutes before. Another officer barked, "Confiscate it!" He stepped forward, but the crowd stirred uneasily. A neighbor shifted, blocking the path just enough to make the officer hesitate. Eyes that had turned away before were now watching, too aware of the blinking red light. The bound woman lifted her chin, her voice calm. "Let it record." The boy swallowed, raising the phone higher. His breath was ragged, but his hand steadied. The rope dug deeper into her skin, yet somehow she appeared freer than the men standing around her. Narration. Every second filmed was a wound the town couldn't hide anymore. The rope wasn't only around her wrists, it was now wrapped around the reputation of everyone complicit. The officer tried to laugh. "No one will care about some shaky video." But the woman's eyes found him, sharp and certain. "They will, because your laughter is louder than mine ever needs to be." The crowd shifted again, unease spreading like wildfire. The camera didn't blink. The illusion of silence shattered, not with shouts, but with one trembling hand that refused to lower. ChatGPT said, the clip spread faster than anyone expected. By midnight, phones glowed in darkened rooms across the county, replaying the officer's laughter, the rope, her silence. It wasn't polished, it wasn't steady, but it was real. Too real. At a diner booth, two men stared at the screen. One muttered, "Could have been staged," but his voice cracked, betraying doubt. His friend didn't answer, just pushed the phone away like it burned. Narration. What had once been hidden in plain sight now spilled into places where denial had lived comfortably. And denial was running out of breath. In an office break room, a woman set down her coffee. "That's Sheriff Dean, isn't it?" No one replied. The silence was heavier than the steam rising from her cup. Another whispered, "My cousin works under him." The words hung there, dangerous, unanswered. Meanwhile, in the woman's own home, her daughter scrolled through hundreds of comments. Some cruel, dismissive, others furious, demanding action. Her hands trembled as she read them aloud. "They see you, Mama. They finally see." The bound woman, now free but quiet, only nodded. Her face carried no victory, only a knowing weariness. She said softly, "People don't change because of a video. They change when they can't keep pretending." The daughter leaned closer, whispering, "And now they can't." Narration. It wasn't justice, not yet. But the clip had loosened something. A truth forced into the open, replayed until it couldn't be ignored. The rope that once held her wrists was now knotted around the conscience of a town. In the silence that followed, the phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another share. Another whisper breaking loose. The silence after the video's spread did not last. Whispers turned into recollections, and recollections into wounds reopening. At a town hall, an old man cleared his throat. This ain't the first time." His words broke the air like glass shattering. From the back, a woman nodded slowly. "My brother, 19. Sheriff said he drowned." Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed fixed on the front. Someone whispered, "We all knew it wasn't no accident." Narration. The past, once buried under courthouse files and dusty ledgers, began to stir. Each memory dragged another behind it, until the room itself seemed heavy with unspoken names. Across town, a mother unfolded a faded newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local boy dies in tragic mishap." She pressed it flat with her palm, whispering, "They wrote him off like he slipped, like he didn't fight for his life." Her daughter leaned closer, whispering back, "And no one ever asked why the officer was there first." In the courthouse hallway, a janitor paused mid-sweep. "Saw them judges drinking with those same men, laughing about cases that never even reached a trial." He lowered his eyes as though speaking too much could still cost him. A younger voice finally broke in. "How many times did we just look away?" The question hung there, raw, without answer. Narration. The rope in the video was new, but the knots had been tied decades ago. Every buried complaint, every dismissed cry, every smirk behind closed doors, all of it returned, forcing the town to face not just one woman's humiliation, but its own history stitched in silence. The old man's voice cracked once more, softer this time. "Dust don't hide blood. Not forever." The town no longer felt steady. The silence that once protected the powerful now cracked with whispers. In the grocery line, a woman leaned toward her neighbor. "Do you know who she is?" The words carried more weight than the groceries between them. The neighbor's eyes widened, her voice a whisper back. "Not just another victim. She's someone they shouldn't have touched." Narration. What began as shame whispered in kitchens and backyards turned into questions too sharp to hide. The story traveled through pews, classrooms, and courthouse corridors faster than any official denial could chase it down. In the courthouse hallway, a young clerk hesitated near two officers. "They're saying she's connected." "High up," one officer smirked. "Rumors. People talk big when they're scared." But his partner's jaw tightened, betraying the shift. At the church, an elder clasped his hands tight. "God, don't sleep. Maybe this is the turning." Someone near him muttered, "Or the breaking." Heads bowed, not all in prayer, but in fear of what the truth might uncover. Across town, a reporter scribbled fast, her hand trembling. She whispered into her recorder, "This isn't the first time." But it might be the last. Her editor's voice crackled through the phone. "Be careful. Stories like this don't stay safe." She swallowed hard, but didn't stop writing. Narration. The officers still laughed, their bravado louder than their certainty. But the unease spread like a shadow, touching even those who once looked away. Denials came, sharp and practiced, yet softer voices kept rising. Voices that, for the first time, refused to stay buried. In a cafe corner, someone whispered the final line that lingered heavier than all the rest. If she speaks, none of them will stand. The room felt heavier each time she entered. Cameras flashed, microphones stretched forward, yet she never hurried to answer. She stood still, her silence sharper than any speech. Officers sat at the table, repeating their line. The video was taken out of context. Their voices cracked against the quiet she carried. One reporter leaned forward. "Do you have a statement?" She only met his eyes, then lowered them slowly. No words. Just a pause that lasted long enough to choke the room. The officer beside her shifted in his chair, clearing his throat too loudly. Narration. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was weight. Every second she held it, their excuses shrank smaller. People outside the courthouse felt it too, standing shoulder to shoulder, waiting, as if her restraint spoke more than their denial ever could. A journalist whispered to her cameraman, "She doesn't have to say a thing. They're unraveling on their own." The lead officer tried again, louder this time. "We acted within protocol," but his words sounded thinner, emptier. Someone from the crowd murmured, "If that's true, why does she look stronger saying nothing than you do explaining everything?" The line traveled like fire, echoing through the gathered voices. Narration. She gave them no arguments to twist, no phrases to distort. Only composure, the kind that unsettled the guilty more than rage ever could. Every still photograph captured her calm. Every broadcast carried her silence, forcing the world to lean closer, waiting for what she might finally choose to say. And when she finally moved, it wasn't to speak. Just a slight nod as if to herself. Enough to remind them, control no longer belonged to those who shouted. ChatGPT said, "The lawyer's words cut through the room like glass breaking. This town has tied itself to that tree more than her." The sentence hung there, untouched, until the silence pressed on everyone's chest. The judge shifted uncomfortably, tapping his pen. One officer whispered to another, "He's grandstanding." But his voice carried fear, not certainty. Narration. For the first time, the weight shifted. The laughter that once echoed so loudly had no ground to stand on. It was gone. Replaced by the sound of unease, of privilege realizing its reflection had been dragged into the light. The lawyer didn't raise his voice. He leaned forward instead. Every silence, every ignored complaint, every child told to forget it, all of it led here. That tree doesn't just hold her memory tonight. It holds yours, and it won't let go. A woman in the back whispered, "He's right." Another hushed her, but the words had already escaped into the room. The officer at the center of it all clenched his jaw. "We followed the law." The lawyer turned his gaze toward him, calm, unshaken. "No, you followed tradition. There's a difference." Narration. It was not a shout that broke the illusion, but restraint. His stillness, her silence, the community's cracks, together they built a mirror too sharp to look away from. The judge finally spoke, his voice quieter than expected. "Order." Yet no one moved. No one coughed. No one laughed. The lawyer let the pause stretch, then stepped back, leaving only his sentence behind. The town heard it echo, chained not to her, but to itself, and in that silence, even the oak outside seemed heavier. The courtroom felt colder than stone as the video looped again, the officer's laughter echoing through tinny speakers. A rope, a tree, a black woman struggling, replayed until the chuckles turned into weapons of shame. Eyes in the gallery stayed fixed, unblinking. One officer shifted, jaw tightening. "They're twisting it," he muttered under his breath. Her attorney didn't look at him. "No, they're just hearing it how it really sounds." The screen froze on his smirk. It lingered like a scar. His voice had carried, "Tighter, she ain't going nowhere," and now it filled the courtroom again. The woman sat motionless at the front, her hands folded, her face still. But each replay carved deeper into their confidence, each echo of laughter revealing its ugliness. She hadn't needed to speak. The tape did it for her. Another officer leaned forward, sweat gathering on his brow. It was a joke! His words caught in his throat. The jury's eyes didn't soften. Silence spread, broken only by the whir of the projector. The prosecutor leaned closer, voice steady. "Tell me, do you still find it funny?" No answer. Just the faint sound of breathing and the weight of regret settling in the room. Their arrogance collapsed quietly, not with shouting, but with the sudden absence of words. Their smirks had been replaced by trembling lips, their laughter by shallow excuses no one believed. For the first time, the woman glanced at them, calm, unbroken. It wasn't revenge in her stare. It was truth. And in that truth, the room itself shifted, siding not with the uniform, but with the silence that had endured humiliation without bowing. The video ended. No one laughed. ChatGPT said the stillness in the courtroom lingered after the screen went dark. All eyes turned toward her. For minutes she hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, letting their laughter hang like a noose above their own heads. And then, without raising her voice, she began. Identity shouldn't matter. Her tone was even, her words deliberate, each one landing heavier than the last. But since it does... She paused, letting the silence carry her strength. I am the one who signs the policies you ignored. The officers shifted in their seats, the weight of recognition pressing down. One tried to look away, but her eyes caught his, holding him where he sat. The prosecutor leaned back, almost startled by the calm force in her delivery. One officer's voice cracked. You're with the department? Her head tilted slightly, never breaking composure. I don't work beneath you. You work beneath me. The room stirred. Whispered breaths moved through the gallery, jurors exchanging brief glances. The revelation cut sharper than any accusation. Another officer's lips parted, but no words came. His arrogance had vanished. His defense dissolved before it could be spoken. She folded her hands again, her face unreadable. You thought a tree would silence me. You thought laughter would erase my dignity. But today, you face judgment not from me. Her gaze swept over the jury. But from those who have seen exactly who you are. The officers collapsed inward, shoulders hunched, eyes lowered, destroyed not by fury but by a dignity sharper than steel. For the first time, it was not her silence on trial. It was theirs. The air tightened, and no one dared to laugh. The judge leaned forward, glasses low on his nose, his voice steady yet final. This court finds the defendants guilty. The words echoed like thunder, but it was the silence afterward that pressed heavier than the verdict itself. Reporters' pens scratched the air, cameras clicked, yet no one dared interrupt the weight of the moment. The gavel struck once, sharp, final. The sound cut through the courtroom like a blade. One officer's jaw clenched, his face drained of color. Another stared at the floor, lips trembling, but no words formed. The badge that once gave them swagger now seemed like a stain. From the gallery, whispers stirred. Not cheers, not outrage. Just quiet recognition that something irreversible had shifted. She sat unmoved, her composure intact. No triumphant smile, no gloating, only silence. The same silence they once tried to chain her with now turned against them. The prosecutor exhaled, long and slow, as if releasing months of restrained breath. It's done, he murmured, though even he knew it was more than a case that had closed. The townspeople watching from the back exchanged uneasy glances. Their pillars had fallen, and with them the illusions of protection, power, and untouchable authority. A reporter's voice finally broke the hush, whispered to her colleague, "History just shifted in this room." She lowered her eyes briefly, then lifted them again, steady. The gavel had ended their careers, but her silence, calm, unyielding, carried the greater judgment. When the courtroom emptied, no one laughed. No one looked proud. Even the walls seemed to carry the weight of truth, finally spoken aloud. The town trembled, not from noise, but from the soundless collapse of its own illusions. The echo of the gavel still lingered when the uniforms were taken from them. Badges once polished with pride were handed over in silence, the clink against the table sharper than any insult. They left the station with hollow eyes, stripped of the symbols that once made them untouchable. Neighbors watched from porches, arms folded, mouths tight. No one spoke, yet the absence of greeting carried more weight than curses. One officer muttered, "They look at me like I'm poison." His partner, staring at the cracked pavement, whispered, "Maybe we are." Phones stopped ringing. Old friends vanished into excuses. A brother refused to answer the door. A mother closed blinds instead of waving. The shame followed them, not loud, not violent, but suffocating in its stillness. At a gas station, a clerk slid change across the counter without looking up. A pause, then a single word, "Leave." No argument came. They walked out, heads down, carrying the quiet rejection heavier than any jail sentence. One officer tried to laugh, a weak chuckle that died halfway. "Funny, isn't it? We thought silence meant control." The words hung bitter. His partner's reply was low, broken. "Now it means we don't exist." The town had erased them without fire or protest, only the slow, merciless turning away. Every shut door, every averted gaze bound them tighter than rope ever could. She never raised her voice, never demanded vengeance, yet her calm presence in that courtroom had become their haunting, and so they walked through streets that once cheered their authority, now lined with the quiet judgment of eyes that refused to see them. The silence was louder than shame, and it would not fade. The afternoon light fell soft through the branches as she approached the tree. The same oak, the same rough bark, but everything around it felt altered. No jeers, no uniforms circling her like predators. Just stillness, the kind that forces truth into the open. She laid her hand against the trunk, fingers pressing where rope had once dug into her skin. A quiet voice escaped her lips, steady, not trembling. "They thought this would break me." She paused, letting the silence carry the weight of her words. But all it broke was them. A man walking his dog slowed nearby. He recognized her, his eyes widening with a mix of shame and reverence. He lowered his head slightly as if acknowledging something sacred. She didn't speak to him. She didn't need to. Her breath caught, not in weakness, but in clarity. "They chained me here," she whispered, brushing the groove in the wood. "But the chains never belonged to me." The wind rustled, almost like an answer. Memories of laughter, the click of phones recording her pain, flickered across her mind. Yet now those echoes felt faint, powerless, stripped of their sting. What remained was her presence, whole, unbent. Behind her, a young girl's voice broke the quiet. "Miss, is it true what they did?" The girl's eyes were wide, unsure. She turned, her expression calm. "Yes, but listen to me. What matters is not what they did. What matters is that I'm still standing." The girl nodded slowly, as though a lesson had just been carved into her heart. Turning back to the oak, she let her hand fall away. The bark had not softened, but her spirit had hardened into something stronger than rope. The girl's question lingered in the air long after they left the oak. By evening, whispers had already spread across porches and backyards. The same tree that once carried shame now drew children, their laughter rising where cruelty once lived. Mothers called them back carefully, not with fear, but with a quiet reminder. That tree remembers. On a bench nearby, two men spoke in hushed tones. One, older, rubbed his cap in his hands. "Never thought I'd see the day kids ran around it like it's just another tree." The other gave a dry chuckle. "Ain't just another tree anymore? Folks look at it and they see what we let happen." A silence pressed between them. The truth hung heavier than any rope. Later at the small diner, conversations broke off when she walked in. No one jeered. No one dared. The owner simply nodded, sliding a coffee toward her. "On the house," he said softly. She met his eyes, offered the smallest nod back. Nothing more needed. Not everyone welcomed the shift. A man muttered from the corner, "Place was better when folks knew their place." His wife tugged at his sleeve, whispering sharp enough to cut, "Hush, times changed. Best we do, too. The town didn't transform overnight. Some carried guilt, Some carried anger, some carried both. But the tree, tall and silent, refused to let anyone forget. Children's laughter carried into the dusk, pure, untainted. And every sound reminded the town. Innocence had returned where cruelty once reigned. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a step, however small, toward something different. And in that fragile change, the town's reflection grew clearer, whether they liked the image or not.